Wonderful.
All right, how's everybody doing?
Great.
All right, great. Ready.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Welcome to our monthly mental health ministry conversation. And the topic today is the rise in suicide rate in the black community. And so I want everybody that's watching on social media, if you could do me a favor and go ahead and begin sharing this post so that we can get more people involved in this conversation. And Katrina, I'm sure you can probably imagine. I didn't look at the PowerPoint you sent me almost 10 days ago until today. And so I noticed that there's a video in there. So when you're about ready to get to that slide, be prepared to talk about 20 seconds to give me a chance, since it's not embedded in there, to give me a chance to straighten out that screen when you go to the video. All
Okay.
right. All right. And so again, go ahead and share the post so that we can get more people involved in the conversation. And I present to you Katrina Rose Hernandez for our mental health ministry conversation for the month of July.
All right, thank you, Pastor Rawls. Hello, everybody. I'm so glad to see all of you who could join us tonight. I just want to start with a precursor of this is a very serious and touchy situation and discussion. So if at any time you feel like you need to log off the Zoom, log off the whatever you're watching virtually to see this and take a moment, please do so. It's a very serious topic, but it's something that I felt like we needed to take a look at and we needed to have a discussion about. So I'm very happy here to be able to present this information for you. And Pastor Rawls, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and start the presentation. Roxalina, did you have anything you wanted to say before we got started?
No, I think you've set the stage. Let's go.
Okay, so again, the topic is the rise in suicide rates in the African American community. We could get to the next slide, Pastor Rawls. So just an introduction. Go ahead, as you tap, the information will come up. Thank you. According to a February 2022 article that was written in the University of Houston, suicide rates have increased dramatically in among African Americans. Pastor Rawls, there's something
Break It Down is brought to you in part by Mayo Clinic and
Great.
All right. So they go on to discuss how it is seen as a weakness in the African American community to seek help first for mental health, and then to seek help if you're having thoughts of suicide as well. But they say that we folks press on even when we are struggling. The article takes a look at the research from a book entitled The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health. It's written by Professor Rita Walker. She's a professor of psychology at the University of Houston, and she just takes a look at mental health in the African American community and how it's affected us. The article states that prior to the pandemic, the suicide rates were already increasing dramatically, and then they just continued to increase as the pandemic continued. So suicide is increasing in the African American community. It's actually decreasing in the African American community, and that's from information from the Maryland information during the pandemic. So not necessarily all states, but in that area. There's just some statistics to look at. So suicide rates in the African American community in 2018, death rates for African American men and death rates for African American women. So from ages 15 to 24, it's 17.3% for men. Ages 25 to 44, 19.5% for men. Ages 45 to 64, 11.6% for men. And then ages 65 or older, 8.9%. And this is usually out of every 100,000 people. This is the percentage. And then for the women, ages 15 to 24, 4.2%, 25 to 44, 4.5%, and ages 45, 64, 3.1%, 65 and over 1.3, and all ages of women of African American descent 2.9. So if we could just kind of stop there and look at those statistics. Can somebody tell me just like the drastic difference of those statistics in African American death rates for suicide?
Katrina, can you hear me?
I can.
I'm looking at the men and the women now. It's just me thinking that would you say the rate with the men versus the women, because of men, I don't know what is equal rights and all, but feel a little more responsible for a lot of things in relationships and just the things that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis to be a man and a provider and everything else, that comes on with the title, quote unquote, man. Do you think that has play a role in that, their responsibilities as a man?
I think absolutely that, and then being a Black man in America and all of the things that come with that, as far as police brutality and mass incarceration and things of that nature, absolutely play a part, which shows that the men of African American men have a much higher suicide rate than African American women. So absolutely, yes, Brother Cohen.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Pastor Rawls. Oh, wait, yes.
Yeah, I have a thought. Maybe African American men may be less likely to share, rather to carry the load, where maybe women may be a little bit more open to share and talk about it.
Right. So it's kind of having to live up to that. Be a man, don't cry, be strong, and then women are more likely to share their feelings. I agree. Anybody else before we leave it? Okay. And then just some suicidal ideations. That means they're having thoughts, they're seriously considering, or they have attempted. So African American men, 10.7, women, 23.7, with a total of 16.9. And this is grades 9 to 12. So these are high school statistics. And then attempted suicide, African American men, 8.5, women, 15.2. And then total of 11.8. So if we look at this, women are a little bit higher in considering and attempting, but men are more likely to actually go through with it. Any comments?
I know this here might be kind of far off, but we talking in we're dealing with Christians at the same time. Mm-hmm. So how would you look at that rate with men that are saved and men are not? The reason I say that, because do you imagine what the things that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis as just people not being saved, and people that are being saved and we depending on Jesus? And what I mean by that, it's bad. It's hard when we're thinking God don't really say he's there and he'll be there with us and he'll put no more to rebel. We have to deal with that concept on a day-to-day. And so how would you think somebody that don't even have that concept can easily give up? And I might be off just bringing that into this, but I look at it like, man, when I look at things, what I have to go through, and I know some things we go through because we just not as strong as we supposed to be with Christ. And I understand that part, but I'm saying with nobody have no connection with Christ, when they be more something to just give up than somebody that know they had this olive branch that they could just grab to on, or maybe that's not the type we have.
Absolutely. I think we should definitely consider that. If you are a person and you don't have God in your life, you don't have somebody or some, him knowing that he's going to be there for you, he's going to provide. So you're totally hopeless. You're in the world, you're watching the pandemic, you're watching all this police brutality. So absolutely, I think you are correct with that. Pastor Rawls, you want to say anything to that at this point?
I'm just Googling suicide rate church versus non-believers, and,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll see what I come up with.
Okay. All right. So give us the next slide while you taking a look at that, sir. All right, and then percentage of adults in 2019, 18 and older who received mental health services or had access to healthcare and used it within that past year was 9.8. Possibly they had healthcare that covered the mental health issues that they actually went in, got a referral, went to see someone to get help. But then on the opposite side, 18 and older who had some type of major depressive episode with treatment within the past year. So that large number of 59.6 makes me think that it's not something that they were going to seek, but something that had to be emergency, like a Baker Act or some type of hospital stay where it just got to be so bad that they had to receive treatment for that. Roxalina, what do you think about those numbers?
I totally agree with what you're saying. That's the possibility there in terms of it being an emergency and having no other way to address the issue. I agree with you.
Okay.
So
Anybody else?
I looked at the one done by Cambridge, and it said that the reported findings were that suicide risk was 27% lower in Protestants, and because the Christian faith is separated between Protestants and Catholics, but suicide rate is 27% lower in Protestants and 49% lower in Catholics compared to non-Christians, and so
Yeah.
it is a little lower, but it does exist. It does exist.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that extra piece of information. Next slide. Okay. So in the video, I just wanted to be able to let you guys just see some information from there's a professor and another colleague that she's speaking with regarding suicide in the African American community, just to kind of get an idea of the things that I was looking at. There were several things that were just kind of mind-blowing when I was looking up this information. One of the things that they talked about was a slow suicide, which means that they're using some type of drug or alcohol to slowly kill themselves, and they even consider that as a sort of suicide. So it was a lot of very eye-opening information once I was looking up this topic.
Break It Down is brought to you in part by Mayo Clinic and viewers like you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eleanor Seaton, professor at Arizona State University, co-host of Break It Down. Today, we're going to talk about a sensitive topic, suicide in the Black community. And I am joined by Dr. Michael Lindsay from New York University. Thanks for joining me, Michael. So happy to talk about this topic with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It is an incredibly sensitive topic. And so I hope that we can save some lives by having this conversation.
Yeah, so let's just, briefly, rates are going up in the Black community for suicide, correct?
Yeah, particularly among certain demographic groups. So we are mainly seeing an uptick in suicide behaviors and suicides among young folks. So even as early as 5 to 12 years old.
What are some of those documented reasons for the uptick in suicide?
I think that in the last, let's say, 10 to 20 years, we've obviously seen an uptick in terms of Black folks dying at the hands of law enforcement or vigilantes, seemingly for careless reasons, avoidable reasons. There's this experience of vicarious trauma
Right.
that is prevailing as sort of an over looming sort of factor in the lives of kids and families. And so I think that you have to point to that as a plausible explanation. But we also know, and I'll quickly say, that Black and brown kids have been over suspended and expelled from school in lieu of receiving behavioral health supports for the challenges that when white kids present with them, they get behavioral health support.
Right.
I think we also misunderstand or misinterpret the behavioral symptoms and see them as a kid being bad.
Right.
And that implicit bias then does not provide the opportunity for kids to receive support. And then the disconnection from formal mental health treatment related to stigma, I think, is a big issue. But I also wonder about the potential to engender a sense of hopelessness about the circumstances that have historical precedents, right?
Right.
And how do we sort of navigate that, help kids process this information in a way that sort of doesn't lead to any sort of further entrenchment in, depression or anxiety or trauma, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and I think that's a real concern. But I think part of that is telling the whole history. Yes, you talk about the history of Blacks in this country, which includes enslavement, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, after Jim Crow. But then I also think you talk about the fact that we are still here after 400 plus years, and not just surviving, many of us are thriving, and that, we have survived the worst of the worst, along with our indigenous brothers and sisters. And that means something. And so I definitely think you don't want to create kids who are hopeless, but their survival alone is a testament to being hopeful. And so I think it's the way that you present it that's balanced. My parents grew up in Jim Crow, Mississippi. They are the peers of Emmett Till. Emmett Till would be a year old. If he were alive, he'd be turning 81, they're turning 80. And they are still walking around, and I think it's a testament that I'm a professor at a university my parents could not go to when they were 18. And I think that's the history that we should be telling our kids. It's racist progress. It's also racial progress. Right. And shout out to Mia Smith Bynum for that phrase. So I think it's that balance. But I think don't ignore that racist progress, because I think kids need to understand the experiences that they're having. Otherwise, they're left to their own devices. And I just like, I'll use an analogy. Many parents warn their kids to avoid pedophiles. Like, they don't want their kids to be molested. So you have whole conversations about good touch, bad touch. People will do that. They don't want their kids to be inappropriately touched. Rightfully so, because they're trying to avoid harm. Well, I think not talking to your kids about racism is preparing them for a different type of harm. And we should avoid that as much as possible. So that's a lot. I don't want to end on a heavy note. What can we do about this issue? Because even if we save one life, it's worth it. So what can we do?
Right. So I think we can do a better job at how we address behavioral issues that occur in schools. And so to facilitate greater access to care, we need more school mental health providers. We need those providers to be proportionate to the number of kids in schools. And so one provider cannot possibly work with 1,000 kids. And so if providers are available and kids have access to them, I think it will help to meet kids where they are in terms of addressing their behavioral health needs. I also think that we can do a lot in the way of helping teachers and other school personnel, coaches, family members, indeed, understand what the signs and presentations of a mental health issue are.
I would be remiss to not mention the recent suicide of Regina King's son and Miss USA. In particular, I think Miss USA was hard to read about because she had posted on Instagram a few days before and seemingly had it all together.
We need to be in our loved ones' lives and talking to them about the challenges that they have, being persistent in our support. Not saying that in those two situations there was not persistent support, but we just need to be there and present, taking any signs or indication that someone might be at risk for self-harm seriously, to get that person to support, even if we have to accompany them to the treatment, if we have to stop whatever we're doing and be available to our loved ones, we need to do that because it can be a matter of saving that person's life. Take it serious when someone says that they're troubled by something.
So we need to be present in each other's lives.
Absolutely.
In full force. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lindsay. We want to hear from you. What are your thoughts about this issue? What are your recommendations for solutions? Again, this is a sensitive issue in the Black community, but it's a crucial issue. So comment below. Let us know what you think. We look forward to hearing from you. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This hour of local news is made possible by contributions from the Friends of PBS, members of your PBS station. Thank you. If you have comments about Arizona PBS News, please contact us at one of the addresses.
All right, so
on your screen.
Any discussion from listening to the video, a lot of the research was directed towards school-age kids. I know the biggest impact area that I've seen in the research is age 15 to 24, when they're coming from being adolescents into young adulthood. There's a lot of confusion that goes on there. So any comments on that video?
Yeah, Katrina. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I got messed up. I was trying to share, trying to get spoken. I don't even know how to do all this stuff yet, so I'm just staying in. But look here, when the video first came on, when they say that, let me see, I wrote it down, the demographic groups. I know it might be crazy for me, but I don't know what that means when they were saying like the demographic groups.
So that's like Black, white, Hispanic, age groups broken down. So different types of groups within groups.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure that I had good understanding when they said it. Oh, okay. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. Anybody else?
Yeah, Katrina, I have some thoughts and some solutions.
Absolutely.
In terms of, I guess the Dr. Lindsay raised the issue in terms of with children coming and identifying as behavioral problems. I think it's also important to have mental health counselors that are competent in handling these situations. And what I mean by that is this, that they are, for our Black and brown children, that they are sensitive to their needs. I remember when I was in grad school, in terms of cultural sensitivity, there was maybe a course or two. So for a person of non-color to have just a course, and if a brown or Black children come to them, how can they be culturally sensitive to coming from is that they are prepared to handle and address the issues of our children. That's one thought, and also a solution, that they hired competent mental health counselors. The second thing is the teachers or educators do a better job at teaching the correct history. We're not talking about Jack and Jill went up the hill. I'm talking about, and I guess there's a critical race theory where there's such a fight against that, but that's the true history of our African Americans and people of color. And like the doctor also addressed, that if you share the story in terms of how we came to this country shackled and over 400 years, look at some of the things that we've been able to accomplish. So we're talking about hope, not despair,
Right.
but hope. And I did follow the story regarding that young woman, I think she was 30 years old, that committed suicide. She had accomplished so much in her 30 years. I mean, she was just outstanding. So in terms of not having that, so, that issue of hope, and that we should share that with our brown children and our Black children. And the third issue is in terms of our society, I think that when we raise our children, we should also incorporate in, like, I think the comment was about the pedophile or whatever in terms of being inappropriately touched, but also share the spiritual aspect of it in terms of attending church, either virtually or in person, reading our Bibles. That's part of raising our children. That should be included as well. So those are my thoughts and some solutions.
And I 100% agree with you, going back to the school counselors and having them be competent and culturally competent. I've been a counselor for 12 years, and I watched people have different rules for some kids than other kids. And some kids get away with murder, so to speak. And other kids, as soon as they say the wrong thing, then they're disciplined, sent to in-school detention, out-of-school detention, which are mostly our Black and brown children. So I absolutely agree with that. And I think as far as the Miss USA who committed suicide, there are so many people with so much, and they are still like hopeless and in despair. And I wonder if that's because they don't have the love of God, and they don't have some type of spirituality that can help raise them out of whatever issue they think is so overwhelming that they have to take their lives. So absolutely. And then just having conversations with our kids don't, like, a lot of the kids today don't know about slavery and what we had to go through, and all they see is here and now, and this is what we're doing. So they don't appreciate having to come from being held as chattel and sold off and beat and raped and whatever to come into where we are today. So they feel like, oh, we always been here and this is how it is. So they just have no type of, sense of just the history, like you said, where they can kind of draw from, well, we were here and, it's not great now, but it's much better and we can press on. So I absolutely agree with everything that you brought in terms of problems and solutions.
Katrina?
Yes?
I hate to keep, but I hope this is my last. Is it something that stuck out to me?
You don't have to be your last. Keep it moving.
Okay, but I don't want to look like I'm. But anyway, I was looking at. I want two things you helped me with. Let me say that one first. That's cultural sensitive, and then when I'm versing what happened with Miss USA, then I turn around and you remember the incident with Simone Biles, the Olympian. She caught herself right in the brink of, could have been a nervous breakdown or anything. You remember she just said, no, I can't do it no more because of the pressure she was under. So could you verse that with Miss USA and her thing, and kind of school me with being cultural sensitive? Those two things right there. I know they are different, but they kind of ain't. But I was just thinking about that bias girl when she was going through that pressure part of being able to write in the brink of that.
So absolutely. So being culturally sensitive, whether you are a Black counselor, white counselor, Asian counselor, you need to be able to know the cultural background of the students that you are dealing with. So a lot of our counselors are white females who have no idea what these Black and brown children are going through. A lot of them don't care. They come to work, they do their job, they go home. So just somebody to be culturally sensitive to know, okay, so I know there is racism. I'm not going to pretend that there isn't racism. I'm not going to pretend that there aren't barriers that may keep these Black and brown children. So I need to handle them differently.
Yes,
so that's where that cultural awareness comes from. Yeah, and then absolutely, with all that stress on celebrities, even though they look as though they have all the money, all the things, there is a lot of pressure on them. Wasn't there was she playing golf? What was the Asian African girl who also stopped? Tennis. So yeah, so the little girl playing tennis who just said, you know, my mental health is worth more than trying to get this money, trying to be in this competition. So it's a lot trying to keep up with all that stuff to get all the stuff. And is it really worth it? So absolutely.
So I think another thing that we got to make sure that we don't allow, the enemy attempts to downplay the effectiveness of the church. And then many people in the world begins to pick up that rhetoric and think. But when you look at the numbers that I just read from the Cambridge study, basically when you add in the two Christian faiths, the Protestant and Catholic, the suicide rates are 38% lower. And so that means that even in a place to where so many try to downplay the effectiveness of the church and the need for faith, the fact is that the hope that we obtain from the faith makes us 38% less likely to commit suicide. And so that means that the church has to realize and embrace, despite what you hear people saying. Sometimes the most ignorant people talk the loudest, and you have to be able to block out and say, you know what? Not only is what we do needed and effective, we have to really make sure that we convince people of the need for a relationship in Christ, because the numbers say that that people with the hope that we present are 38% less likely to give up on life and commit suicide. So we can't buy into all the noise that's going on out there. We have to know without a shadow of a doubt that people need what we have.
Absolutely. And I think that's just a huge part of it. We look at these people, at these kids committing suicide, and I bet, you know, asking their background, if they have faith-based church that they go to, that they're connected to, they probably do not. Maybe some of them do, because like Pastor Rawl said, it does happen, but a big majority of them probably are not connected to Christ in a church and a community who, you know, cares about them, who's building hope rather than that hopelessness that they are kind of stuck behind. So absolutely.
Katrina, I want to ask Reverend Rose this. Do the AME church in a bigger arena, like, you know, like when CC, Mid-Year, and Planning Meeting and all this, something I might not know, do they have a workshop in there to pass that type of information on to pastors? At least for the AME church, at least we'll have some type of avenue besides what we're doing at Greater Bethel. I'm saying on a bigger arena to feed it out to churches in the AME community. Do they have that, Rev?
Yes, what we do at the connectional level is present ideas for churches to model. And so when we have our connectional meetings, there's a lot of conversation about mental health and the need for mental health, the need for faith, and then what happens is that when pastors and church leaders attend these meetings, we have to go back and implement these, because the real work takes place at the local level. And so at the larger level, they create models, but we have to go and create the ministries at the local level. And so that's one reason why in in our ministry that that we have mental health ministry in our church is because it's been shown at our connectional level that this is an important conversation and something that we need to address at the local level. So even when they present it, it's up to the local churches to now implement it.
Right. Okay.
Okay, next slide, Pastor. So growing concerns regarding increasing rates of suicide. It's from a 2019 study. There's an increasing rate in the suicide among African-American youth. Between 2014, 2019, the rise of suicide for African-American individuals rose 30%. It rose from 5.7 to 7.4 per 100,000 individuals. Suicide rates increased for African-American male youth by 47%. It went from 12.2 in 2013 to 17.9 in 2019. And that's that same age group of 15 to 24, where they're coming from adolescence, going into young adulthood, trying to figure out how and what to do with their lives. And at that time, it was the third leading cause of death for the African-American youth. The rate for African-American female youth increased by 59% from 2.7 in 2013 to 4.3 in 2019, and that's the 15 to 24. And then recent reports have suggested that the racial disparities during COVID-19 and suicide death rates are linked to the rise in the rates in the African-American youth. They're seeing all these things happen. They're seeing all this death. They're seeing other people take their lives. And I guess they're getting ideas and thinking, well, maybe that's the way to go, because they don't have a faith-based community to help show them that there is a different way that they could be going. Some risk factors include being of racial ethnic minorities, feeling hopeless, and other systematic stressors like racism are risk factors of suicide for the African American community and different minorities. Let's skip this video, Pastor. It's a little bit long. I want to get through the slides. If not, it'll be here in the presentation that other people can go back and look. So pretty much the video, there were words and phrases that came out. The second one is long. I don't know. We might be able to get back to it, but things that come up in those videos are trauma. So like the doctor in the first video was saying, slavery, Jim Crow, and then we have police brutality. So there's always some type of trauma that is happening in the African-American community. And then suppression of feelings. We are always having to suppress our feelings to be strong, whether you're feeling strong or not. Self-medicated behaviors, abuse of alcohol, drugs, and other things are issues that come up. There's also built up anger. There's a lot of misplaced anger that the second video talks about, where he's angry about things that have happened at home, but he's taking it out on people out in public, and that's gotten him into a lot of trouble. Risky behaviors like gun violence, joining gangs, selling and using drugs is an issue. And then lack of access to health care. When we went into the pandemic, devices, Black and brown students didn't have devices. So school districts had to give out or check out devices to them and check out hotspots for Wi-Fi because there was such a disparity there. And then coping skills is something that's much needed, but I don't think African-American people have or know because they are not using the mental health platform as much as they could be. And then resilience, like we as a people, where we have come from slavery, from being shipped and stolen and murdered and sold, and everything else that came with slavery, everything else that came, Jim Crow, everything else that's coming now. We have always been a very resilient people. And like the doctor said, she is now a professor at a university that her mom and dad couldn't even attend when they were growing up. So just knowing that even though we have all of this stuff going on, we are still a very resilient people, and we're able to kind of move forward. But we're having some struggles, mostly our African American men at a certain age, that 15 to 24 age group, with just trying to be, more hopeful and less hopeless. Any comments on those?
Yeah,
Phrases,
I think the
words.
one thing that we have to understand on the male side is, and it was intentional,
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
so we have to be more supportive, because society has intentionally um, removed or made it difficult for the black man to fulfill the role that we feel that we should play in our families,
Mm-hmm.
and has intentionally stripped the black man from our families, and so like you said, even going back to, what happened in slavery, to do what they did to demasculate them and in front of their families, to pull their families right from them, and then even now, in the time that we live in now, um, it when you it's and we're in a we get divided, and so unfortunately many times for a black woman to feel strong, have to feel like almost as if come with the attitude that there's no need for the black man, and that's a trick of the enemy. We're
Mm-hmm.
stronger together. But in so many instances, it's I don't need. I don't need. I can do it. I can do it by myself. As if it comes to raising a child, when in reality we know that child works better in a two-parent situation, um, and not when one parent is demeaned. That boy is going to have a bad idea of what it is to be a man, and so we got to stop turning against each other and allowing things like feminism and things like that. And then even on the male side, we got too much testosterone in some cases, and don't respect our women. But we got to stop turning against one another, and know that we were designed to work with one another. We can't be deceived into devaluing our families and our relationships. We are better together.
And when you're saying that, I think even about the federal government, where when there's a two-family household, they don't want to have help with housing. They want the black woman to be by herself with her children, and that's how she qualifies. If there's a man, well, then y'all can work and y'all can make some money. Like things like that, where it's intentionally done, like you said, to just kind of break up. Well, if I want to get this house, if I want to get this Section 8, then you can't be with me. I have to be by myself with my kids. And that, I really feel like absolutely that's done intentionally.
And then you got a brother. He's sitting there hiding in the house, but nobody can know he
Right.
lives there. And so
Right.
he can't be the king. He can't be the head of his household because he got to hide,
Right.
in order to be with his family. And we got to know
Yep.
that these things are intentional, and it's a system that's designed to be that way. And we have to support one another to make sure that we hold that family together, and place high value, on our community, on our village, and on our families, and not allow that system to cause us to turn towards one another or devalue. And so, if for a woman, if you know that the system is designed to make you not respect the black man, it's designed to make you not honor the black man, you got to fight harder, because there's trauma that he's dealing with. And I'm not making excuses for the black man, but every king needs a queen, and so we have to find ways to not allow the system to define how we look at one another and how we respect one another in that family structure.
And social media plays a big part as well. Like I look at commercials, about half the Black men are in a, like if they're in a commercial with a partner, it's a white woman, it's a Hispanic woman. They don't pair us with each other, even in commercials and movies and music videos. It's always a foreign person because that's what's supposed to be the cool thing for the Black men to date. So I think there's lots of things that play part to that, to kind of keep us separated as a family, as a strong Black family. So we just have to be just very aware of that and make sure we're not playing into that.
And that's trauma. That's trauma. If I think my role is to be protective, like the priest of my household, the protector of my household, the provider of my household, and to be the provider don't mean you got to make the most money, but it means that you have to ensure that your household is provided for. And if I look at myself as a priest, protector, and a provider, but the world is pushing me to something else, a leech. The world is defining me as something else, lazy. That's trauma right there. And I have to find ways to one, cope with the system, but then overcome, my self-perception, of, and not succumb to how the system has defined me, because it's just going to be generational, and that's trauma.
Right. Yep. Anybody else?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I look at it as a form of control where they shackled us and brought us here physically. And we do have choices in terms of how we, as Pastor said, work together as a family. If not, they're still controlling. There's still a form of control, mental control. So, but we have that choice. It's a decision that we have to make in terms of how we will not conform to the world, but to establish what we know what is right through God. And if we're struggling in terms of trying to find a way to cope, that's where the mental health comes in. I know there's been a stigma attached, especially in our African American community, but as mental health counselors, this is what we're trained to do. If we have a problem physically with our bodies, we seek out help through doctors, nurses, or whatever. And if we're struggling mentally, we also should seek that type of help and look forward to how we can handle situations through prayer and also to develop coping skills to get us through this process so that we will not be controlled as we were when we came to the Americas. That's my comment.
Any others?
I think there has to probably be value when we say mental health counselor. That there has to be value placed on with all the same characteristics, being culturally sensitive, all those things. There has to be value placed on sound Christian mental health counseling also, because if the face shows that, and we're dealing with suicide rate, if it shows that we're 38% less likely to commit suicide, there has to be value in that too. And so in mental health counseling, if faith, and it might not be the Christian faith, but faith in something stronger than me, faith in something bigger than me, if faith is not a portion of it. I think about some people that I see like on like Breakfast Club and stuff like that. And you got guys like Charlemagne that's always talking about mental health counseling and how important it is, but then he says some like real stupid stuff. He says some stuff that's not healthy for our community. He has influence, and so he might get mental health counseling, but there are things the Bible said there's power in words, and there are things and there's behaviors that he shows that's not productive for our community. And so I think that when we're talking about mental health counseling, that mental health, just like I'm specific I know what I'm looking for in a doctor and a mental health counselor, the things that are proven to show effectiveness, you can't disregard those things. And so if the Christian faith or another faith of somebody, if they show if it shows bigger in another faith, but if faith says that I'm less likely to be affected, more harmful by this trauma, faith has to be a part of that counseling. You can't disregard something that's effective.
Absolutely. It has to work hand in hand.
Yep. Yep. All right, next slide. Okay, so go back one. So what are we going to do now? Now that we know what these statistics are, now that we know, the high risk group, now that we know, what's up against us, like, what do we do now? So I think, like in the video, we need to be vigilant. We need to be aware. We need to make sure we're making connections with people when they're coming to our church community. Pastor Rawls is very good at getting with the people who are coming and hurting and needing, and making sure we follow up with them and follow through with whatever they need. So just being vigilant. Also continuing to fight the stigma of mental health. I think just talking about suicide itself helps. Talking about how faith helps lower that suicide rate helps. So just being able to reach different people, trying to get different people in the community to know, yes, we know it is an issue. These are the types of things, like what can we do to make sure it's not going to make us just another statistic. Also, like they said, talking with racism with our children, like Roxalina said, that critical race theory. I took a class at UF a semester or two ago, and it is mind-blowing. Like, it is information that our children need to know, and they are withholding that. So I guess as families and as church communities ourselves, we are going to have to be responsible for teaching that information, because it is very, very much needed information that lets people know why they behave the way they behave. And it's because of all the things that have been done to us, and that is still happening to us as African American people.
Right. Yeah. I think we do our part. And so, like, if I look at somebody like Will Smith, I say to myself, because I don't know everything, but I do have my opinions based on what I see from the outside. And so I wouldn't be surprised if the news came up and said Will Smith committed suicide. That wouldn't surprise me, because I think his wife does not lift him as a man. I think she diminishes his role as a man in that family. And but I have no ability to affect Will Smith. I have no ability to provide, but I do have a sphere of influence, and so I have to make sure that what I see now, let me apply that. And so in ministry, I have to make sure that we highlight the significance of manhood. And to highlight the significance of manhood doesn't mean that I have to take anything away from womanhood.
Right.
But that's when people talk about Black Lives Matter. Well, what you saying? White lives? No, we ain't saying it got nothing to do with White Lives Matter. I'm telling you
Right.
that based on things that we're seeing, it's important to highlight the Black Lives Matter. So in church, if we highlight the significance of manhood, being strong Black men, it doesn't take away from anybody else, but it needs to be done. And so I
Right.
can do something like that in our church, and teach our families how to support one another, and how to lift one another. So I can't change Will's situation, but I can in our church say, this, provide that teaching in our ministry. And so we just have to work in whatever areas we're in where we have our sphere of influence and try to make a change in those areas that we're in as opposed to doing nothing.
Right, right, absolutely, absolutely. Next slide. So some coping skills and prevention information for suicide is providing safe spaces for positive interactions. Community mental health awareness initiatives like the one we have that Pastor Rawls talks about, where the students and the adults can come in and get trained at UF to help with different mental health awareness things. And then what we're doing here today, when Roxalina and I present information on a monthly basis, those types of things can add coping skills and help in prevention. Positive ethnic and community pride. Like Pastor said, Black Lives Matter. You want to be proud of yourself. It's not like any other life doesn't matter, but you have to make sure that you're uplifting yourself and your community and having pride in that. Also welcoming faith and community organizations. Like he said, it's much lower rate when you are connected to faith and church and God and Christ as far as suicide rates. And then trauma-informed healthcare providers, problem solving and resiliency skills, support of caring adults, educators, faith leaders, pastors, and social workers, things like that. So just making sure, even like the information that I looked up, it said that you need to be connected to faith leaders, faith-based information. So it also says that yes, being connected to a church helps with this issue of suicide and lowering those rates.
The good thing about faith is faith constantly corrects you. Faith constantly shows you that, you know what, there's some adjustments that need to be made. You can improve. But when you don't have something like that, you go around and you think you got it all together, that you know it all, or you depend on, you got this mentor, this coach, or whatever that's other human that you're using as an example that has the same tendency that you have to fail. And so faith is something that when we look at it, it constantly puts us in the mirror and shows us how we can be better, with our faith. And it doesn't lie to me. It shows me my frailties.
Yep. And so one other thing I wanted to read that I didn't include in the presentation, but I just kept going, looking up things after I had found all of this information on suicide in the African American community. And this is something from the Center of Medicare Advocacy, where the study says racism is the leading cause of death in the United States. So the authors highlighted that one of the most influential social determinants of health is systematic racism. Noting that Black people in the United States are more likely to die young, not because there is some intrinsic biological risk, but because of racism. The Center for Disease Control, or CDC, also recognizes that racism is a serious threat to public health. In addition to COVID-19, the pandemic's disproportionate impact on racial and ethnic minority populations. Data shows that racial and ethnic minority groups also experience higher rates of illness and death across the spectrum of health conditions. So this racism that everybody says, oh, it's not a big deal. You guys are way much more better off than you were before. Look at slavery. Now you all better. I don't know why people complaining. No, even the CDC recognizes that racism is a huge cause of death and illness in this country for African Americans because of all the things that come along with it.
I mean, you can look at the people in Flint, Michigan. I mean, that was environmental racism. And so you got this predominantly Black city, and you got the conditions that's going on with the water. Well, that's due to systemic racism, and people are dying early from it. You have people that put certain type of pollutants or things near Black neighborhoods that those that causes cancer and things like that
Mm-hmm.
they wouldn't even allow
Right.
in other areas. And so those things are racist.
Mm-hmm.
And people sometimes are so narrow minded, they don't see it. They just think, oh, because somebody called you a nigger, that ain't gonna kill you. No, but
Right.
when you set up policies that call me a nigger, when you set up policies that make my living conditions more difficult, that's where these numbers come from.
Right, absolutely. And I was watching one on the news where in one of the Hispanic communities in California, they were allowing all these big trucks to come through this residential area, and it was causing air pollution, and people were getting sick and they were dying. And so these people were having to go and rally and ask for them to make a detour for these big trucks not to be coming through their community. And it still hadn't been resolved up until like that last week when I was watching it. So, like you said, different things like that. And it's very passive aggressive. So they do stuff like that. And then they're like, what? The trucks just needed somewhere to go. And that was the route. No, if you know that people are here and people are being hurt by that, do something to fix it instead of just leaving it. People are dying, people are getting sick, and those people majority are Black and brown people. So it's very interesting how things go. But people see it, and prayerfully there'll be changes. But yeah, so I think we really need to rally around our Black men. That seems to be the highest rise of suicide rates in America. We see very seldom Black men in churches, especially between that critical age of 15 to 24. You may see older Black men, younger Black kids because their mom is there, they're being brought there, but just that we really need to rally around. I think women, we get a little bit more support. And like Pastor says, intentional, kind of to leave the Black man hanging by himself. So just to be able to support and rally around our Black men to get them more included in the church, more active in the church, and things like that. Try to get that suicide rate back down, that hopelessness out of the way. Any other comments, questions? Roxanne, your hand up.
Oh, I'm all set. A wonderful session needed. And yeah, it's just story after story in terms of suicide. And the more that we talk about this issue, hopefully more people will be open and intentional about doing something about it, being proactive. And as I said, the more we talk about it, more we discuss it, maybe we'll be successful. We will be successful through prayer and counseling, and as I said, working hand in hand with that.
That's all I have, Pastor.
All right, thank you very much. This is a wonderful discussion, and I just encourage other ministries and other churches to make sure that we don't get caught up in the shout and the song. That we provide space in our ministries for self-care, for people to make sure that they're caring for themselves and their homes, and allow people to place priority on their care. Kind of like when you ride a plane, they tell you, before if blank happens, you put your own mask on first. Look out for yourself before you try to help somebody else. And
Right.
and our ministries have to make sure that we are respectful of the need for self-care among our people, and encourage home to be cared for before we make such a huge investment in the health of the church. If we allow our people to be healthy, if they're parents and they have children, they have a responsibility to supporting that child before showing up to church. And so if that child has a football game or a cheerleader thing or something like that, you know, your biggest responsibility is to go to support your child, so that home can be healthy, and then you can come and support the church. And so we got to make sure we put our priorities in line, encourage our families to care for themselves, so that they can be strong enough to do the work that we need to do, you know, in the church. And we have to be extremely supportive of one another and not fall to the tactics of the world to divide us and conquer us. There's value in working together, and there's value in family, and we should never forget that and buy into the lie that the world is telling us. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. If this was good for you, just share it on your page or share it with a friend, and we'll see you all next month. May the peace of God be with you.
All right. Have a good night.
Amen.
Something else
Amen.
so be with you too.
Amen. Amen. Amen.